We all know Henry VIII had a messy personal life, but did you know he once ordered the execution of his pet parrot? That's just the tip of the iceberg regarding the bizarre quirks and oddities surrounding this infamous king. In this video, we'll go into the dark, unsettling and downright weird facts about Henry VIII that history often leaves out. So stay tuned to find out something truly interesting. Number 8. Henry was a hypochondriac. During Henry VIII's troubled rule, the man's health problems seemed to pile up like a haystack. Henry had more than just regular headaches. He thought he knew everything there was to know about medicine. Talk about a difficult patient. Headaches? He had them. Insomnia? He had it. He was sick with more things than people could line up for at a Tudor feast. It's true, the king was petrified of being sick. Fear of the plague hung over him like a dark cloud, making his courtly adventures less fun. It's easy to picture him walking on tiptoes because he was afraid of getting any sniffles or sneezes. His royal image needed extra immune boosters on top of courtly behavior. But let's look into Henry's health problem in more detail. There are many ideas that he wasn't just sick with a cold. He could have been fighting type 2 diabetes and syphilis at the same time. Think of a king or queen holding a staff in one hand and a medical report in the other. Undoubtedly, it was a very special kind of royal juggling act. In 1536, though, the king had a more real health problem. Henry was taken off his horse during a jousting contest. As a result, a leg injury that wasn't just a few scratches and bruises from a fight between knights. After the battle, his thigh got sore and swollen, leading to much talk and medical attention. Number 7. He was relatively thin. Henry is usually pictured as a plump, regal figure when we think of him. But if we go back to when he was younger, you'd see a different Henry, one who was slim and athletic. A small figure was nothing new to the man. The pounds on Henry's royal scale, however, increased with time. In his twilight years, that lean young man had grown into a lumbering giant, over 400 pounds. Envision a man towering at 6 feet 4 inches, bearing the burden of the entire world, or more precisely, slung over his waist. An interesting story is told by the armor, which is frequently a suit of proof for a man's evolving body. His youthful set measurements showed a waistline of 36 inches, which is the pinnacle of royal fitness. We see that the figures now convey a new message when we jump ahead to his later years. This royal enlargement may be described as nothing short of majestic in girth, reaching a waistline of 60 inches. So, we can do the math. Henry piled on about 200 pounds between his 30s and the end of his reign when he was 56 years old. Some may call it a royal development in weight categories, but either way, it's a huge change. Number 6. He led England to debt. With his kingly tastes, Henry plunged England into debt throughout a lifestyle that screamed luxury. He was a ruler whose desires were as boundless as his kingdom, resulting in overspending of epic proportions. As Henry's troubled rule ended, his inventory looked like a royal department store on steroids. The man not only owned palaces, but he also gathered them like stamps. He was a royal owner of about 50 houses, which is so much real estate that it would make even the biggest mogul blush. Let's talk about weapons now. Henry had a soft spot for weaponry, and it showed. An arsenal of 6,500 handguns was at his disposal, a collection that could arm a small army. If that wasn't enough, he had a fleet of 70 ships at his beck and call, sailing on the waves of excess. Henry also loved music so much that he had a huge collection of instruments that would make any artist green with envy. He had a huge collection of 78 recorders, 78 flutes, 5 sets of bagpipes, and a virginal, which was an early keyboard. It was an over-the-top symphony that rang through his mansions. Number 5. He was a music master. Henry VIII was more than just a king. He was also a great musician. His love of music filled the halls of his time. He played the keyboard, strings, and wind instruments very well. Besides being a good player, he wrote 33 pieces of music preserved in the Henry VIII manuscript, now in the British Library. There have been persistent reports that he was the one who made greensleeves for Anne Boleyn, but scholars have debunked these claims. The English folk song, Green Sleeves, doesn't sound like Henry's music. Scholars say it comes from an Italian style that spread to England long after the king's last musical performance. So Henry may not have written Greensleeves, but his music is still important to history. Number 4. He blamed the Church of England on Anne Boleyn. Henry VIII's love life was like a soap opera. In the 1600s, when young Henry married Catherine of Aragon and became king, he was shocked to learn that he had no male heirs who would live past infancy. The Tudors were very worried about who would take over after them. Henry liked to set royal fashion trends, so he looked at Anne Boleyn, a young lady in waiting who seemed to have charmed him completely. He wanted to marry her, but she was already taken. This made the king think of a way to avoid getting married. The idea of a pope annulment came about in 1520. It was a way for people to switch wives out of love and to keep the family name alive. No one knew this love interest would set off a chain of events ending in one of the most dramatic religious breakups ever. In 1534, Henry's desire to achieve his love goals drove the British Parliament to pass the Acts of Supremacy. What does England get out of this? When Henry VIII and his successors took over the Church of England, they said goodbye to the Pope's power and began an age of change. The king or queen was in, not the Pope. Things did happen after this messy split though. After the fight, England was split into two groups, Catholics and Protestants. Each group had its own opinion on the royal religious reshuffle. Henry's search for a male child started a new era in English history. Number 3. Henry had a weird nickname. Henry VIII had this quirky nickname, Old Copper-Nose. It wasn't because he had a thing for copper fashion or anything. It all went down during a money makeover called the Great Debasement. England needed cash for wars, so they cut down on the precious metals in coins, making them cheaper. But that thin silver or gold coating on the coins would wear off, revealing the king's face with his distinctive nose in good old copper. So people started calling him Old Copper-Nose. Imagine pulling out your coins and finding the king's nose peeking at you in copper. Talk about a royal bling gone a bit wonky. Number 2. Henry was a published author. Henry VIII demonstrated his literary talent in a 30,000-word response to Martin Luther's Protestant 95 thesis before the Great Split from the Catholic Church. He became the first English king to produce a book with this lengthy proclamation, in which he lavished admiration on the Roman Catholic Church. Pope John Paul II was so impressed that he gave Henry the honorific Defender of the Faith. Number 1. A cruel ruler. As Henry VIII aged, the crown weighed heavier on his temperament, transforming him into a ruler marked by paranoia and a touch of ill temper. His later years were not a stroll through the royal gardens. They were more like a journey into the darker side of monarchy. The infamous Tower of London became a haunting symbol of Henry's reign. The king ordered crowds of prisoners into its ominous walls. The number of executions during his 37-year reign is downright terrible. An estimated 57,000 to 72,000 individuals met their end at the hands of the executioner. Henry, once the dapper young king with a twinkle in his eye, had morphed into a monarch who sent more men and women to their deaths than any of his English predecessors. Which fact did you find the most shocking, and why? Let us know in the comment section below, and check out the channel for more interesting videos.